thing that I want to talk about really is two things. Point number one to clarify is in a normal year, not this year. This year is unique. A normal year, the bifurcation of Purim, that in Jerusalem and other walled cities, Purim is observed on the 15th of Adar. The rest of the world, Purim is observed on the 14th of Adar, 14, 15. Again, this year is a unique little twist I'll get to. But I want to talk about the normal year, and then we'll talk about the unusual year. What is the basis of the bifurcation of the 14th and the 15th? The 15th is called Shushan Purim. But last time I checked, we're not in Shushan, right? So why are we keeping Shushan Purim? So the thing that is interesting and a little confusing is the reason Shushan kept the 15th is not the same reason why we keep the 15th. And that is the following. In the book of Esther, it is recorded that the Rishayim, Haman was given permission to eradicate the Jewish people on the 13th of Adar, and then we were given permission to fight back and take care of ourselves. So we fought battles on the 13th. We rested and celebrated on the 14th, and that is why the 14th became the holiday of Purim. And many people point out that Jews do not celebrate the day of defeating the enemy. We celebrate the peace that comes afterwards, because you might say, let's celebrate on the 13th. That's when we vanquished our enemies. But you know, we're not really interested in vanquishing our enemies. We're not really interested in destroying people. We celebrate when there's shalom. So that's why Purim is the 14th. Now, here is the thing. Esther then made a special request to Achashverosh that there are still many, many enemies of the Jews that are lurking in Shushan. Could we be given an extra day to fight our enemies who would still try to destroy us? So Achashverosh gave permission to the Jews of Shushan, only city of the world, the Jews of Shushan, to fight on the 14th, and they rested on the 15th. So if we just read the Megillah, there's no mention of walled cities having a different Purim. The only thing you get in the Megillah is that Purim is on the 14th, but because the city of Shushan had to fight, or they did fight an extra day, they make Purim on the 15th, and that's why it's called Shushan Purim. So the question becomes, according to that, instead of saying every walled city should read on the 15th, the halacha ought to be everybody reads Megillah and keeps Purim on the 14th, except for the city of Shushan. That's what you get when you read the Megillah. So what is the basis? Now the basis is because there is a pasuk in the Megillah that's a little enigmatic. It says, therefore, the open, unwalled cities keep Purim on the 14th. It says open, unwalled cities. And it doesn't say, it actually does not say when the walled cities keep Purim and why there should be a difference. So the Ran, other Rishonim, explain the following way. The Ran says, interestingly enough, that Purim was established the very day, the very year that we had this, and then next year, Mordechai and Esther sent out letters that this should be a holiday everywhere. Originally, the only cities that observed Purim were the open, unwalled cities, because they perceived themselves as vulnerable to an invading army. Meaning, if you were in a walled city, assuming it was a Jewish city, if you were in a Jewish walled city, you didn't really think you were in danger in the first place, because you had a wall around your city, and therefore the foreign army would not be able to attack you. So when Mordechai and Esther enacted a holiday of Purim, initially only the unwalled cities treated it as a holiday. Meaning, if you would go back, let's say, more than 2,000 years ago, to the first few years of Purim, maybe the first year or 2 years of Purim, the Megillah and the Shalach Manos and the Matanos Li'Avyonim and the Seudah was only observed by unwalled cities. Walled cities didn't observe it on the 15th.
the other way around. Walled cities didn't observe it at all. So when they eventually got in line and decided to join the rest of the Jewish world, they were actually penalized by being forced to observe Purim a day later to kind of show they are Johnny-come-latelys. So I hope you understand here that the reason why walled cities keep Purim on the 15th is not the same reason why Shushan kept Purim on the 15th. Shushan kept Purim on the 15th from the very, very beginning because they fought the war for an extra day. Right? They fought on the 14th as well, so their Purim was the 15th. And that's all the way back to the very first year. The walled cities didn't keep Purim at all because they thought we're safe. We're safe. They didn't realize that without God's help, enemies could have poured in and killed them as well. And when they finally got in line, the notion of giving them Shushan Purim was a bit of a knas, almost a bit of a punishment to show that you didn't join the holiday until later, therefore you will observe the holiday later. Okay, so that's one point I wanted to make, that Shushan Purim, as applied to Yerushalayim, is a bit of misnomer. It's accurate only in the sense that, yeah, walled cities will observe Purim the same day as Shushan. So that's why Shushan Purim. But it's not the same reason. Shushan observed the 15th because that was their day of rest. The other walled cities observed the 15th as a knas for not taking on the observance of Purim initially. Yeah.
Two things. Who did you say shared that opinion with Rabbi? You said a rabbi wrote that.
The Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim. Yeah, Rabbeinu Nisim, one of the great Rishonim. Okay?
And
yeah.
So just to clarify, Shushan, they fought for two whole days, or they just fought a day later?
No, they fought for 2 straight days. They fought on the 13th, and then Queen Esther requested an extra day, so they fought on the 14th. They rested on the 15th. Okay, and that's why that was Shushan Purim.
Did she request it in advance, or like on 13th?
Didn't hear you. The what?
Did she request that?
No, she requested apparently at the end of the 13th day. It's on the 14th day itself. We're not given the time exactly, but she requested right then to have an extra day and the like. Okay, yeah. Now, let me just say a few words. I'm sure you went through the halachas. I'm not going to go over it in great detail of somewhat of the unusual situation we have this year. This is called the 3-day Purim Mishulash, and this is a unique problem. I wouldn't call it a problem, but a unique situation only for walled cities, such as Yerushalayim. And the idea is that when the 15th of Adar, which is Shushan Purim, our Purim, falls out on Shabbos, you have an immediate problem. See, now again, let me just explain this. In the rest of the world that's not walled, Purim is Friday, that's it. Thursday night, Friday, that is it. Which means if you live in Ramat Beit Shemesh or whatever it is, this Shabbos is going to be a regular Shabbos. Okay, so they don't get a 3-day Purim unless they go back and forth. Purim is Friday, Thursday night, Friday, that's it. But in Yerushalayim, our real Purim day is Shabbos. Shabbos is the 15th of Adar. So what's the problem? Why don't we just do Purim on Shabbos? So the answer is, we're not allowed to read the Megillah on Shabbos. This is a rabbinic decree, because the Chachamim were afraid lest we come to carry, just very similar to, we don't blow shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, because the rabbis were afraid in your anxiety to blow shofar, you'll go out and you'll carry it without an Erev in a public place. We don't take a lulav when the Sukkot falls out on Shabbos. So similarly, we don't do Megillah lest you would carry it without an Erev. Of course, people ask a very obvious question. Well, wait a second here. We learn the Torah every Shabbos. I mean, if you're telling me that I'll be so concerned about reading Megillah that if I don't know how to do it, I'm going to run out and carry my Megillah in the street. So you might as well say, don't read the Torah on Shabbos. You might run out and carry the Torah. I mean, why would there be more of a chashash, more of a concern that you'll carry the Megillah than you'll carry the Torah? So it's hard to know, but it could very well be that the Chachamim were concerned that Purim is special. There's a lot of enthusiasm. Maybe people are also a little inebriated, so they might forget things that they wouldn't forget on a regular Shabbos. So we start off with this basic fundamental idea: we can't read Megillah on Shabbos. Got it. So the question is, if I can't read Megillah on Shabbos, when should I do it? Should I do it before Shabbos, Friday, or should I do it after Shabbos? So there are two arguments to do it earlier rather than later, which is indeed what we do. Argument number one is that earlier is better than later because at least earlier is still a Purim day somewhere. Earlier is the 14th of Adar. Later is the 16th of Adar. So if I have a choice, earlier, later, earlier is logically better because at least it's a Purim day. That's one idea. And the second idea is a Gezeras HaKosov. It says in other words, a scriptural directive. It says in the Megillah, V'lo Yavor, do not pass, which is interpreted to mean never delay Megillah. Megillah is always early. So the first cornerstone, therefore, is that when the 15th of Adar is on Shabbos, the Megillah is read earlier Thursday night and Friday, which means in this type of year, everybody reads Megillah the same time. In Ramat Beit Shemesh and in New York and in Baltimore, Megillah is read Thursday night and Friday because that is their Purim, the 14th of Adar. In Yerushalayim, we read it Thursday night and Friday, although this is not our Purim, but since we can't read it on Shabbos, we go earlier rather than later. So that takes care of Megillah reading. Now, in addition, there's one other mitzvah that we do Friday, not Thursday night, but Friday, and that is the mitzvah of Matanos Lievyonim, the mitzvah of giving charity to the poor, which is normally done Purim in the daytime, not at night. So here we also do it in the daytime. We can't give money on Shabbos, of course. It's muktzah. We give it the same time we read Megillah. Why is that so? So the Gemara explains that poor people used to show up, I actually still do, at Megillah readings, because Megillah readings had large crowds of people, so it was a good place to get money. And therefore, the general rule in halacha is, Matanos lievyonim always correlates with whenever you are reading Megillah. So in a normal year, that would be the 15th in Yerushalayim, in a walled city. This year, it's going to be the 14th, because the 15th is on Shabbos. So the two mitzvos that we do, Thursday night and Friday, we read the Megillah Thursday night and Friday, and we give Matanos Lievyonim Friday, because it's connected to the morning. Okay. Now, we don't say, this is interesting, Al Hanisim. Al Hanisim is the special Purim insert. We don't say Al Hanisim in either the Shmona Esreis or benching for Friday, whatever, if you're watching on Friday. Why is that? Because the Al Hanisim, which is thanking God for the miracles and the salvations, is not connected to Megillah reading. It is connected to the official date of your Purim holiday. And in Ramat Beit Shemesh, Friday is the official date of Purim because it is the 14th of Adar. But in Yerushalayim, it is not the official date of Purim, which is Shabbos. And therefore, it's a very strange paradox. We don't say Al Hanisim, and for reasons I'll discuss, we don't have the Purim meal and we don't have Shalach Manas till later. I'll get to that in a moment. So the only two things we do, Thursday night and Friday, is Kriyas HaMegillah, and on Friday we give Matanos Li'Avyonim, because that always tracks the reading of the Megillah. Okay? No Alanisim. I mean, you could have a meal if you want, but there's no Chiyuv of a Purim meal, and there's no Shalach Manos obligation. Okay. We now come to Shabbos. So Shabbos is our real Purim. For us, it's Purim. For Yerushalayim, walled cities, it is Purim. But we're not going to read Megillah. We're not going to give Matanos Li'Avyonim. We're not going to have a special Purim suit. I'll talk about why that's so. So in what way is Purim celebrated on Shabbos? So in two ways, and possibly a third way. Number one, on Shabbos, because that is our Purim, you do recite the Al Hanisim paragraph in both benching and davening. Although I do have to tell you that if you forget Al Hanisim anytime, you never have to repeat the Shemona Esrei, the benching, but that's true every year. Same thing is true this year as well. But this is the Al Hanisim prayer, number one. Number two, we're going to read the Parsha of the week, Kisisa, but the maftir of Kisisa will be the normal Torah reading of Purim morning, which is the end of Parshas Beshalach that talks about Amalek attacking us. And Vayavo Amalek, etc. Okay? So that's the second way. So the first observance of Purim is the Al Hanisim. The second observance of Purim is the Purim Torah reading as the maftir after the Parshas HaShavua. On a regular Purim that's not on Shabbos, the maftir is what you read. You actually divide it into three aliyahs, but here it'll be one aliyah. And the third observance, which is more optional, is some people will eat a special food. They will add a special, not a special separate meal. They'll have just regular 3 meals, but they will add a special food in honor of Purim at the Shabbos meal, and that would be a little bit of a partial fulfillment of a Purim Seudah. Okay, so that's day 2, Friday, Shabbos. Now, Sunday is a bit of a mystery. The two things we do on Sunday, we do not say Al Hanisim. We don't give Matanos Li'Avyonim, or we don't have to, we've already given it. So what are the two things we do on Sunday? We make our festive Purim meal, and we don't say Al Hanisim in the benching for that Purim meal, and we give the Mishloach Manos, we give the food gifts to a friend, right? It's two items, at least 2 items of food to at least one friend. Mishloach Manos ish l'reyeyu. So this is a little peculiar. So one thing I can say is very clear. The same way Matanos Li'Avyonim will always follow Megillah reading, because the poor people show up at Megillah, it's also the case, Mishloach Manos always follows the Purim meal. Because part of the purpose of Shalach Manos is you're giving a person food that they could use at the Purim meal. So once the meal is going to be Sunday, it makes sense that Shalach Manos is Sunday. That makes sense. The correlation makes sense. But the puzzle is, why do we make the meal on Sunday? That's a very odd day to choose. Remember, Sunday is the 16th of Adar. It's not a Purim day for anybody. In other words, once you make the meal on Sunday, I understand that Mishloach Manos is going to follow the meal. That's not a problem. But why don't I make the meal on Friday? Why don't I make the meal? I mean, for example, Ramat Beit Shemesh, right? Baltimore, Teaneck, right? They make their Purim meal, of course, on Friday because that's Purim. Now, of course, that itself has complications, which actually we don't have those problems. And when you make a big meal on Friday, which is, again, that's not our problem here, but it's a problem everywhere else. When do you make the big meal? Because there is a big problem. We normally don't want to make big meals on Friday because that's going to take away your appetite for the Shabbos meal. So the Ramah actually says that when Purim, Yud Dalet, is on Friday, you have to make the meal early, and he recommends that you start the meal, not finish the meal, start the meal before Chatzos, before the middle of the day. So you've eaten some of the meal before Chatzos, and therefore, even if you go on for several hours, that's going to be permissible because you began it early enough. Some people have different proposals. But the question is very simple. Why don't we do the same thing? I mean, we're reading Megillah early. Why don't we make the Purim Suda on Friday, just like they'll do everywhere else in the world? And whenever you make the Purim meal, that's when you're going to have Sholach Manos, Eino Chinami. So this is a kind of a mystery. And the truth of the matter is, the Gemara does not discuss Purim Masholosh Bichlal, and there are Rishonim like the Meiri, who actually say on a Purim, well, actually, it wouldn't be a Masholosh, actually. There'd be nothing. According to the Meiri, it's only a Purim Shtayim. The Meiri basically says, you make the meal on Friday. Meaning there actually is nothing left for Sunday. And yet that's not the halacha and that's not the minhag. The halacha is we make the meal on Sunday. Why is that so? So it is a bit of a mystery, and as I say, there are Rishonim that argue with this, but it seems to be maybe two reasons that are given. Reason number one is you try to avoid a big meal on Friday, even early, unless it is the actual day of Purim. So Bishlama in Ramat Beit Shemesh or Baltimore or Teaneck, where Friday is Purim day, you don't have a choice. You have to have your Seudah on the day of Purim, if that's possible. Therefore, we do it early. But since Yerushalayim's Purim is Shabbos, and Friday is not really the Purim day, but let me go backwards for a moment. Why don't we make the meal on Shabbat? Okay, let's start with that. Why don't I make the Purim meal on Shabbos itself? There's no Avera to make a big meal on Shabbos. So the answer that's given is that since on Shabbos you're already having fancy meals, it would not be recognizable that you're doing something special for Purim. Right? We want it to be very clear that this is a Purim meal. If it's a fancy meal and it's on Shabbos, people are going to say, oh, it's a Shabbos meal. So that explains why we don't make the Purim meal on Shabbos. But why do I choose Sunday over Friday? So the suggestion would be we want to avoid a big meal on Friday, even if you're going to start it early, unless it is the actual date of Purim, in which case that's going to override that concern. So in the places like Ramat Beit Shemesh or Baltimore, where Friday is the actual day of Purim, so then we say, even on Friday, you're going to make a big meal, but just start it early. But since for Yerushalayim, Friday is not our actual Purim day, and it's just that we can't do it on Shabbos because it's not going to be recognizable that it's being done for Purim, so in such a scenario, better to do it Sunday than Friday. Okay, and then once you make the meal on Sunday, so at that point, Sholach Manos is going to follow the meal, because one of the central purposes of Sholach Manos is to provide food for a Purim meal. Okay? So that's kind of the evolution of both Shushan Purim generally and Purim Meshulash specifically. Yeah.
On a regular Purim, so in a walled city we have the fast is on a different day than...
Yeah, that's correct. That's very, very interesting. there's a certain benefit that you get. Right, the 13th of Adar today is the fast of Esther. And in a non-walled city, we go straight from the fast of Esther to Ma'ariv and Megillah reading. And the custom is you don't break the fast until after Megillah reading. So that actually means in non-walled cities, Tainus Esther goes into the night because you don't eat anything till after Megillah reading. In a normal year, Yerushalayim, we get a certain benefit because we finish the fast, but we don't read Megillah till 24 hours later. So we can end the fast as soon as the fast ends, and we have the next day. This year, we're all in the same boat. Since all of us will be reading Megillah tonight, so that means we go straight from Tainus Esther to Ma'ariv and Megillah. So this year we suffer along with everybody else that we extend the fast a little longer. Now, as I say, one doesn't have to be overly strict on this, meaning if the fast is over and you're not feeling well or whatever it would be, you can have something before Megillah reading. Water, actually, the truth of the matter is many poskim say water is legamri mutter. You don't have to worry about water at all. Anybody could have water. And if you need to eat fruit, you try to avoid mizonos or bread. But if you need to eat something a little bit, don't worry about it. It's not a big chumrah. The truth of the matter is, the fast itself we're not so machmir on. But okay, you try to keep the fast, but to extend it till after Megillah reading, if it's difficult for you, you don't really have to be that strict on it. But be sure, don't make hamotzi or whatever it would be.
Where does that come from? The day is over. Why do you have to extend it?
It's not because of Tainus Esther. It's a general rule that once a zman of a mitzvah has come, you shouldn't eat until you do the mitzvah. Same thing with B'dikas Chametz, Ner Chanukah. It's a general call. It's not. Yeah. So it turned into extending the fast, but in reality, it's only the general rule. It's the zman of the mitzvah. Okay. So now I just want to mention a little bit about Tainus Esther. Yeah.
I was going over some halacha with someone the other day, and they said Purim could start even as early as the 11th of Adar.
Well, not bisman hazeh, but the Mishnah gives the following principle. The Mishnah, the first Mishnah in Maseches Megillah, tells us that the Chachamim made a special dispensation for small villages adjacent to big cities that didn't have minyanim or didn't have people who could read the Megillah, and they would go to the big towns on Monday and Thursday to market their wares. So in order to spare them the need for a second trip, they were allowed to have the Megillah read to them as early as the Monday or Thursday before Purim. And that could be as early as the 11th. For example, if Purim falls out on Sunday, which it can, so Sunday is the 14th, Shabbos is the 13th, Friday is the 12th, Thursday is the 11th. So those villages would be able to hear the Megillah on the 11th. And depending on the days, it could be the 11th, the 12th, or the 13th, and the like. So that's a special dispensation for villages that either didn't have minyanim or didn't have people who could read the Megillah. But the Gemara says, V'zman hazeh, that does not apply. Or already in the time of the Gemara, which was quite long ago, it didn't apply. So this heter of Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel is not brought in the Shulchan Aruch at all. The Gemara itself says it didn't apply. But now I want to share with you one machshava about Tainus Esther. That's a very, very powerful machshava. Let's go back to the case where Purim falls out on Sunday. When I say Purim, I mean Yud Daled, the 14th of Adar falls out on Sunday. So when do you observe the fast of Esther? Now the fast of Yud Gimel would be Shabbos. We obviously don't fast on Shabbos. Okay? We also don't like to fast on Friday because we don't want you to enter Shabbos in a state of deprivation. So when Purim falls out on Sunday, Motzei Shabbos Sunday, Tainus Esther is on Thursday. Thursday. I mean, it happens to be the same day as today, but not for the same reason. But I'm talking about today is the 13th of Adar. This is the right time. But Thursday is the wrong time, but that's when you do it. Now, here's the problem. The Shem Shmuel asks a very simple question. When the 9th of Av falls out on Shabbos, and we don't fast on Shabbos, when do we observe the fast of Av? Motzei Shabbos and Sunday. We push it off. So l'chora, why when it comes to Tisha B'Av, we push it off, and when it comes to Tainus Esther, we bring it on early? Now, one answer you might say is, well, wait a second here. How can I push Tainus Esther later? What am I supposed to do? I mean, Shabbos is the 13th. So what do I say? Push it off to the next day? That's Purim. Push it off 2 days? That's Shushan Purim. Which even both days of Purim, you're not allowed to fast. In other words, no matter where you live. Yerushalayim, we cannot fast on the 14th. Other cities, they cannot fast on the 5th. Right? So you'd have to push it off for 3 days. That's too much. So it's more logical to go earlier. I mean, that's one answer. But the Shem Shmuel gives a different answer. That's a very, very nice answer. The Gemara itself explains in Maseches Megillah, why do we push off the 9th of Av? That if when it's Shabbos, we do it on Sunday? Because the 9th of Av represents calamity, catastrophe, tragedy, suffering. So we always try to push it off as much as we can. We don't want to bring it on early. Right? So days of sadness and grieving, if we can defer it, we defer it rather than bring it on early. The fast of Esther is really quite unique. The fast of Esther is the only one of our fasts, putting aside Yom Kippur, which does not commemorate a sad event. Lehepech. We were in danger. We fasted, we prayed, we did shuvah. And what was the result of those efforts? We were redeemed. This is so interesting. Tainus Esther is not a sad fast. It is not a fast commemorating tragedy. It is not a fast mourning over a bad thing that happened. In a sense, it's a fast that is celebrating the fact that Hashem listens to our prayers and He accepts our tshuva and He brings us redemption. He brings us salvation. So the Shem Shmuel says, what's wrong with bringing that on early? So if Purim is on Sunday and you don't fast on Shabbos, let's do it early. Because the whole reason for delaying Tisha B'Av, I don't mean Tisha B'Av, but delaying the fast of Tisha B'Av, the Gemara itself says, we don't want to bring on paraniot, catastrophe, earlier than we have to. But Tainus Esther is not about paraniot. Tainus Esther is about Yeshua. So we could call it, in a sense, the happy fast. Yeah, we say selichos. We say vidoy because the avoda of a fast is to do tshuva. But it's not a commemoration of something bad. It's just a reminder that Hashem is makabel, our tshuva. Right? It's a fascinating answer. It's one of those answers, I think, once you hear it, you wonder, gee, why didn't I think of that? I mean, there's such an obvious distinction between the fast of Esther and the 9th of Av, that would explain why one is pushed off and one is accelerated to an earlier date. But one interesting chronological point, and I have a longer share about history. I don't know how to get into all of the history here. But most people just assume that the fast of Esther is a zecher, is a commemoration of the 3-day fast that Esther decreed on the Jewish people after hearing of Haman's decree. So 2 questions on that. Well, if we are commemorating Esther's fast was 3 days. How come our fast is only 1 day? That's not so much of a question, really, because one could understand that even if you're commemorating a 3-day fast, a 3-day fast would be very, 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 very hard for a vast majority of people. So the Chachamim didn't want to make it a 3-day commemoration. Got it. But there's another problem. Chronologically, what were the 3 days of Esther's fast? People don't realize how much Pesach is connected to the redemption of Purim. Esther heard of Haman's decree. On the 13th of Nisan, a fast was immediately proclaimed. Day 1 was 13th Nisan. Day 2, 14th Nisan, which is Erev Pesach. Day 3, 15th of Nisan, first day of Pesach. Esther went to Achashverosh on the first day of Pesach. This is 11 months before the Purim War. And then she made her first party. And then she invited Haman and Achashverosh to a second party the next day. That night, the night of the second night of Pesach, Achashverosh didn't sleep. The next morning, Haman is leading Mordechai around. There is party number 2. Esther reveals herself. Haman is hung. So, granted, I don't think anyone says Kaddish for Haman's Yortzeit. But what is Haman's Yortzeit? The second day of Pesach is Haman's Yortzeit. In other words, now granted, people sometimes get the story a little wrong. Just because Haman was hung, that did not take us out of the water. We still had that decree on the 13th of Adar. The story of Megillah is not over then. There's still a lot that had to happen, but this was the real beginning, the downfall of Haman. So, that's why some Hasidim have a minhag, that the second day of Pesach, which in Eretz Yisrael is Chol HaMoed, in Chutz La'aretz it's still Yom Tov, they have a kosher LePesach Hamantashen. I don't know what it tastes like. And they sing the Purim song, Shoshanas Yaakov. Shoshanas Yaakov, on the second day of Pesach. Now, technical question. Did they fast only during the day? Or did they fast? Seems very hard to imagine, but it is possible. Human beings can survive for 3 days. Did they fast day and night? Well, the Pasuk actually says that Esther said you should fast day and night. It says Laila v'yom. Well, wait a second. The night of the 3rd day is the first night of Pesach. Now, there's no Beis HaMikdash, so they didn't have a Korban Pesach, and they're not in Israel anyway, that's true. But the first night of Pesach, there's a lot of stuff you're supposed to eat. Some are doraisa, and some are drabanan. Eating matzah, the first night of Pesach, is a chiyuv doraisa. Eating the moror, many say if you don't have a Korban Pesach, it's drabanan. The 4 cups of wine is drabanan. But here's the simple question. Did they have a Seder that year? So there are many Meforshim who actually say that because of this 3-day fast, they did not keep the mitzvahs of the Seder that year. Didn't have matzah. How could that be? How could they not keep a mitzvah? Because they felt that the lives of the Jewish, this is the opposite. Just like we would say, because of pikuach nefesh, you're allowed to eat non-kosher food. This is a pikuach nefesh the other way around. They felt that their lives were so much in danger that without a fast, God is not going to give them atonement. They felt that fasting was a matter of life and death. Right? It's the reverse of the usual scenario, right? The usual scenario is somebody says, I got to eat on Yom Kippur, otherwise my life is in danger. This is the other way around. We have to fast for 3 days, otherwise our lives are going to be in danger. Okay, now that's how some people learn. Other Mefarshim learn that when Esther said fast for 3 days and nights, she didn't mean complete night. She just meant your fasting of the day should extend into the night. Not telling you exactly how long, but at some point, let's say an hour or two into the night, you can then eat and drink. So they would be able to have a Seder, and that also makes it a little more plausible how you can have a 3-day fast, because to have a 3-day fast without anything at all is possible, but people would be on the verge of collapse or verge of fainting. But if you understand that she was just saying extend the fast into the night, but they would be allowed to eat or drink, that will be okay. So the point is, though, that it turns out that where we observe Tainus Esther is not at all when Esther herself fasted. Esther herself, or not just Esther, the Jewish people. The Jewish people that year fasted 13th, 14th, 15th of Nisan. We fast Tainus Esther adjacent to Purim. So, again, the Mefarshim explain that although our commemoration does not correspond with the chronology of it, but we don't like to fast during Nisan. Nisan is a joyous month even more than Adar. It's the month of total redemption, and we're not allowed to fast in the month of Nisan. The only exception is the plague of the fast of the firstborn. Maybe we'll talk about that later. And as a result, they simply moved the commemoration of Esther's fast to Adar, where it is connected to the Purim story, although, remember, it was 11 months, right? Tainus Esther is not the day before Purim. Esther's fast was 11 months before Purim, but we make it adjacent, yeah.
Would they have had 2 days or 2 Seders in the Purim times because they were in exile?
That's a very, very good question. Remember, there is no Beis Hamikdash as a result. The question is, did the rabbinic decree of keeping 2 days because of calendrical doubt, did that apply that early? Because again, rabbinic decrees have a date. They come into existence at certain times. And usually it's hard to identify the exact time, but there could have been a possibility. They would have had 2 Seders, 2 days of Yom Tov in the diaspora. Okay, we'll stop here. Wish you all a... I'm sorry, you want a question?
Yes, please. You said that the Jewish people felt that it was such a dire situation they had to fast. So let's say they really did fast 3 days and not take a break in the night. How is it that their feeling overrides the Torah obligation? I didn't understand that.
Well, here's the thing. It's not just a question of feeling. The issue is this. The issue is that we have a sword hanging over our heads. We have this decree of Haman in which on the 13th of Adar, we're going to be eradicated. We need divine mercy. We need to come to tshuva. One of the powerful mechanisms that bring a person to repentance is fasting. So they felt, if we're not going to fast, we're not going to be inspired to tshuva, we're not going to get divine mercy, and our lives are going to be forfeited. Therefore, they felt the imperative of fasting was a matter of life and death. In that sense. Okay, wish you all have a happy, joyous episode.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.